The crash of the wine glass shattered the silence. And for a moment, time froze. Red liquid spilled across the pristine white tablecloth, mirroring the stain now spreading across my dress. And my heart. I could feel 200 pairs of eyes on me, their gasps cutting through the air like shards of glass. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. But in that moment, it became the day everything fell apart. From the outside, everything about my wedding day seemed perfect. The venue was stunning. The flowers were in full bloom. And the man I thought I loved stood beside me. But behind the facade was a storm I hadn't seen coming. My golden retriever, Sandy, had sensed it long before I did. She stayed by my side all morning, her soft whines and worried eyes trying to warn me. I should have listened. The unraveling began during the reception. Jack, the man I had vowed to spend my life with, stood to give a toast. But instead of love and gratitude, his words were laced with accusations and venom. Then came the glass, hurled across the table, staining not only my dress but also the perfect image I had built of him in my mind. As the room erupted in chaos, I fled, Sandy trotting faithfully by my side. I didn't know it then, but this was only the beginning. The secrets I would uncover in the days to come would shake me to my core. And Sandy would become more than just a loyal companion. She would be my lifeline, guiding me through the darkest chapter of my life. The morning of the wedding was a dreamy haze of delicate details and careful preparation. The air carried the fresh scent of blooming magnolias, and sunlight poured through the tall windows of the bridal suite at Willow Creek Estate. My gown, a masterpiece of intricate lace and soft satin, hung on the antique wardrobe, while Sandy lay curled up by the window, her tail thumping gently against the wooden floor. She seemed to sense the significance of the day, watching me intently as I adjusted my veil in front of the ornate mirror. "You look stunning," my best friend Lisa said, stepping back to admire the final touches. Her smile was warm, but her eyes hinted at concern, something I chose to ignore. Every detail had been meticulously planned, from the pastel peonies adorning the tables to the handwritten vows Jack and I had exchanged in private. Yet, as I stood there, I couldn't shake the unease that had settled in the pit of my stomach. Jack's usual morning texts had been absent, and when I asked the best man about him, his response was evasive. "You know how Jack gets when he's nervous," he said, laughing it off. But his words didn't ease my mind. I pushed the thought aside, determined to focus on the joy of the day. When the time came, I walked down the aisle to the soft strains of a string quartet, my heart pounding with a mix of excitement and anxiety. Jack stood at the altar, his broad shoulders framed by the arch of cascading flowers. He looked every bit the perfect groom, but something was off. His smile felt forced, and his eyes avoided mine as if shielding a secret. Still, I convinced myself it was just wedding jitters, after all. Everyone had told me how stressful weddings could be. Beside me, Sandy's steady presence kept me grounded. Her leash held loosely in my father's hand as she trotted proudly down the aisle. She was more than a pet. She was family, and her unwavering loyalty made her the perfect ring bearer. As Jack and I exchanged vows, my voice trembled with emotion, but his delivery was stiff and mechanical, as though the words meant nothing to him. The crowd applauded as we kissed, sealing what was meant to be the start of forever. Yet, even as the cheers filled the air, a flicker of doubt tugged at my heart. Sandy barked softly, breaking the moment with a sound that felt almost like a warning. If only I had listened. The ceremony was beautiful on the surface, a symphony of orchestrated perfection. The string quartet's melodies intertwined with the rustle of the wind, carrying the scent of fresh flowers through the air. As I stood under the floral arch, Jack's hands clasped mine. I could feel the weight of every watchful eye. The officiant's words echoed with warmth and promise. But as he spoke, I found myself distracted by the subtle tension in Jack's grip. His palms were clammy, his smile tight, and his gaze kept darting to the crowd as though searching for something or someone. When it came time to exchange vows, my voice wavered with genuine emotion. Every word I spoke carried years of love and hope, and I glanced at Jack, yearning to see the same reflected in his eyes. Instead, his response felt rehearsed, a series of hollow phrases that left me feeling colder than the spring breeze brushing against my shoulders. Still, I clung to optimism, convincing myself that nerves had stolen the sincerity of the moment. As the officiant declared us husband and wife, the guests erupted into applause. Jack leaned in for the kiss, his lips brushing mine briefly before he pulled away, almost too quickly. My heart sank, but before I could process the thought, Sandy's cheerful bark rang out, pulling the crowd's attention to her wagging tail. The moment drew laughter and eased some of the tension that had been building inside me. But only for a moment. Walking back down the aisle hand in hand, I glanced at Jack, hoping to find reassurance in his expression. Instead, his eyes avoided mine, fixating on the horizon as though he couldn't wait for the ceremony to be over. Beside us, Sandy trotted happily, oblivious to the growing weight in my chest. As guests cheered and showered us with petals, I plastered on a smile, determined to believe that the uneasy feeling gnawing at me was just wedding day jitters. Little did I know, the true storm was just beginning to brew. The reception began with a flurry of excitement. Guests mingled under the fairy lights strung across the grand garden, sipping champagne and marveling at the sunset. The air buzzed with laughter and conversation as Jack and I made our entrance. Greeted by a chorus of applause, the string quartet transitioned into a lively tune, signaling the start of the festivities. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to relax, soaking in the warmth of the celebration. Our first dance was supposed to be a highlight, a moment of intimacy in the midst of the crowd. But as Jack led me to the center of the dance floor, his grip on my hand felt loose, almost disinterested. The music began, and we swayed awkwardly. Jack's steps were clumsy, and twice he stepped on the hem of my dress, muttering an absent apology. I smiled tightly, pretending not to notice the curious glances from our guests. Sandy, lying obediently at the edge of the dance floor, let out a soft whine, as if sensing my discomfort. As the evening progressed, Jack's behavior grew more erratic. He disappeared frequently, returning with a fresh drink each time. His tie hung loosely around his neck, and his once polished demeanor began to unravel. During dinner, he barely touched his plate, choosing instead to down glass after glass of champagne. His laughter grew louder, his gestures more exaggerated. I caught Lisa's worried gaze from across the table, her unspoken question clear. "Are you okay?" I wasn't. Something was wrong, and it was becoming impossible to ignore. When Jack stumbled while making a toast to our parents, spilling wine on the pristine white tablecloth, the room fell into an uneasy silence. I tried to salvage the moment with a joke, but the tension lingered. Sandy, now sitting at my feet, pressed her head against my leg, her warmth grounding me amid the chaos. The final straw came during the toast meant for us, the newlyweds. The DJ handed Jack the microphone, and I watched as he swayed slightly, his glass raised high. "To my beautiful wife," he began, his words slurring. "She's always wanted perfection. Perfect dress, perfect flowers, perfect husband." His laughter was sharp, almost mocking, and the crowd shifted uncomfortably. My stomach dropped. I reached for his hand under the table, hoping to steady him, but he pulled away. "Should I tell them?" he said, turning to face me, his voice louder now. "Should I tell them about David?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. My heart raced as I tried to process his words. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jack's face twisted with anger. "Don't play innocent," he spat. "I saw the messages. Late nights, coffee meetings. You think I wouldn't notice?" Before I could respond, Jack hurled his glass across the table. The red wine splattered across my dress, a stark stain against the white fabric. The room erupted in chaos. Guests stood frozen in shock, murmurs of disbelief filling the air. Cameras flashed as the spectacle unfolded. capturing every humiliating second. Sandy barked sharply, breaking through the noise, her protective stance drawing eyes away from me. I stood, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. My breath hitched, and for a moment, the room blurred. Without a word, I turned and walked toward the exit, Sandy at my heels. The perfect wedding had become a perfect nightmare, and I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that this was far from over. As I fled into the cool night, Sandy stayed close, her body a comforting presence against the whirlwind in my mind. The string of fairy lights blurred into streaks as tears streamed down my face. Jack's words echoed cruelly, but it was Sandy's insistent nudging that brought me back to reality. I needed to move forward, not for Jack, not for the humiliation I had endured, but for myself. And this was only the beginning of the truth unraveling. The drive back to my apartment was a blur. Lisa insisted on taking me home, her face a portrait of quiet fury as she navigated the darkened streets. Sandy sat in the back seat, her head resting on my shoulder as though she could sense the pain coursing through me. "You're going to be okay," Lisa said firmly, her grip tightening on the steering wheel. I wanted to believe her, but the weight of what had just happened pressed heavily on my chest. When we arrived, I sank into the familiar comfort of my couch, Sandy curling up beside me. Lisa handed me a glass of water and sat across from me, her eyes scanning my face for answers. "Emily, we need to talk about what just happened," she said softly. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I don't even know where to start," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Start with Jack," she urged. "What's going on with him?" I hesitated, the memories of his erratic behavior flashing through my mind. "He's been different lately," I confessed. "Distant, secretive. But I never thought he could do something like this." Lisa's expression darkened. "Emily, this isn't just about tonight. There's more to this, and you need to figure out what it is." As if on cue, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. I picked it up hesitantly, my heart sinking when I saw the message preview. "Unknown number. You need to know the truth about Jack. Call me." My hands trembled as I stared at the message, the words blurring through unshed tears. Lisa leaned forward, her voice calm but insistent. "Emily, you have to call them. Whoever this is, they might have answers." I nodded slowly, my fingers hovering over the call button. Before I could press it, Sandy let out a low, guttural growl, her ears pinned back as she turned toward the front door. A chill ran down my spine. Lisa stood immediately, her protective instincts kicking in. "Stay here," she said, motioning for me to sit down as she moved toward the door. I clutched Sandy's collar, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. The soft creak of the door opening was followed by a tense silence. Then Lisa's sharp voice cut through the air. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" A man's voice responded, low and urgent. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. My name is Ben. I need to talk to Emily. It's about Jack. Please, just hear me out." Lisa kept her stance firm, her hand resting on the edge of the door as she scrutinized him. "And why exactly should we trust you?" she shot back, her voice sharp and steady. Ben hesitated before speaking, his tone measured but heavy with urgency. "Because Jack isn't who you think he is. I know this because I used to work with him." He glanced past Lisa at me, his gaze piercing but sincere. "And if Emily doesn't listen to me, she could be in real danger." Lisa hesitated, her eyes darting between me and Ben. "Work with him? Doing what?" she demanded, her voice filled with suspicion. Ben shifted uncomfortably but kept his tone steady. "Jack and I were involved in financial operations. Let's just say they weren't exactly legal. At first, I thought he was just another ambitious guy looking to make a name for himself. But then, I started noticing things, people disappearing, accounts being drained, women left with nothing." My breath caught in my throat. "Women?" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. Ben nodded solemnly. "Emily, Jack has a pattern. He finds women who are financially stable, charming his way into their lives. Then, he isolates them, drains their accounts, and moves on. He's done this before multiple times. I've seen it happen. Sandy let out a soft growl, her gaze fixed on Ben, as if sensing the weight of his words. Lisa folded her arms, still skeptical. If you knew all this, why didn't you stop him? Ben looked down, guilt flashing across his face. Because back then, I didn't know the full extent of what he was doing. I thought I was just helping a friend with shady deals. But when I figured it out, he turned on me, threatened me. I've been watching him ever since, trying to gather enough evidence to take him down. I felt the room spinning, the pieces of the puzzle slowly falling into place. The unexplained absences, the constant accusations, the control he tried to exert over my finances. It all made sense now. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice trembling. Ben stepped closer, his expression earnest. I need your help. You're in the perfect position to expose him. If we can gather enough evidence, emails, bank transfers, anything, it will be enough to stop him for good. But you need to act fast. Emily, Jack won't let you walk away easily. Lisa moved protectively in front of me, her tone defiant. And how do we know this isn't some elaborate scam of yours? Ben sighed, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a folder. I thought you might feel that way. Here. He handed it to Lisa, who flipped it open cautiously. Inside were photographs, bank statements, and even court records, all pointing to Jack's history of deceit. I leaned forward, my stomach twisting as I scanned the documents. One name stood out, Rachel Bennett, the same name Jack had mentioned once, dismissing her as a crazy ex. He told me she moved away, I whispered, my fingers brushing over a photo of Rachel's tear-streaked face in what looked like a police report. She didn't, Ben said grimly. She tried to expose him and nearly lost everything. He made sure of that. Tears welled in my eyes as I looked at Lisa, my voice cracking. What do I do? Lisa closed the folder with a sharp snap, her expression fierce. First, we keep you safe. Then, we bring that bastard down. Lisa narrowed her eyes, not fully convinced. You used to work with him? Doing what exactly? Ben sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. It's complicated, but I'll try to make it clear. Jack and I were part of let's call it an operation. Financial scams, money laundering, and identity theft. It wasn't pretty. First, I thought he was just a guy trying to hustle his way up. But it turned out, Jack wasn't just in it for the money. He thrived on control and manipulation. I felt my stomach drop, my voice coming out shaky. Manipulation? What do you mean? Ben met my eyes, his tone softening. Emily, you're not the first. Jack has done this before. He targets women successful. Independent women, gets into their lives, their finances, their trust. Then, when he's taken everything he can, he burns it all to the ground. Sandy growled softly at Ben's feet, her posture tense. Lisa crossed her arms, still skeptical. So why are you here now? If you knew all this, why didn't you come forward sooner? Ben hesitated, guilt flashing across his face. Because I was afraid, he admitted. Jack has ways of silencing people. He ruined a mutual friend of ours, a woman named Rachel. When she tried to go public, he discredited her, made her look unstable, and left her with nothing. I knew if I spoke up, he'd come after me too. The mention of Rachel sent a chill down my spine. I vaguely remembered Jack mentioning her once. A fleeting comment about a clingy ex who couldn't let go. My hands balled into fists. What happened to Rachel? I asked. Ben's expression darkened. She went off the grid. Last I heard, she was in a shelter, trying to rebuild her life. The room felt like it was closing in around me. Every doubt I'd ignored, every uneasy feeling, came rushing back with a vengeance. What does he want from me? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Ben stepped closer, his eyes filled with urgency. Everything. He'll drain your accounts, isolate you from your friends and family, and leave you questioning your sanity. And if you try to leave before he's done with you, he'll make sure you regret it. Lisa placed a protective hand on my shoulder. Her voice sharp. Well, that's not going to happen. Emily's not alone in this. Ben nodded. That's good. You're going to need support because Jack doesn't play fair. But there's one thing working in your favor. What's that? Lisa asked warily. Ben gestured to Sandy, who stood alert and unyielding. Jack hates unpredictability, and he won't expect Emily to have someone or something that can sense danger before it comes. I glanced at Sandy, who met my eyes with an intensity that sent a flicker of hope through me. What do I do now? I asked, my voice trembling. Ben took a deep breath. We need to gather evidence, real, tangible proof of what he's been doing. Emails, bank records, anything you can find. And Emily, his voice grew serious. You need to be careful. Jack doesn't like to lose, and he'll do whatever it takes to keep control. Lisa straightened up, her tone decisive. All right, we start gathering evidence now. Emily, does Jack have access to any of your devices or accounts? I nodded hesitantly. He knows my email password. He's always been paranoid about transparency. Ben frowned. That's our first problem. We'll need to secure your accounts. Change every password. Lock down your devices. And make sure he can't track your movements electronically. Lisa grabbed her laptop from the counter and slid it toward me. Start with your email. Use something he'd never guess. As I typed, Sandy let out a low growl, her ears twitching toward the door again. Ben moved quickly, peeking through the window. He turned back, his face grim. There's a car parked outside. Could be nothing, but we need to stay cautious. My hands trembled as I reset my accounts, the weight of Jack's potential retaliation settling heavily on my shoulders. Lisa placed a reassuring hand on my back. We'll get through this, she said firmly. You're not alone. Ben crouched down to eye level with Sandy, scratching her behind the ears. She's sharp, he murmured. If anyone or anything tries to come near, she'll know. The tension in the room was palpable as I finished updating my passwords. I leaned back, exhaling shakily. What's next? Ben pulled a USB drive from his pocket. I brought this. It has a program that can track unusual activity in bank accounts or email threads. We'll run it on your devices to see if Jack's left any breadcrumbs. Lisa raised an eyebrow. That sounds advanced. Where'd you get it? Ben smirked faintly. Let's just say I've picked up a few things over the years. The program started running, lines of code flashing on the screen. As we waited, Lisa handed me a glass of water. Emily, do you have access to Jack's personal files? Anything he might have overlooked? I hesitated. There's a locked drawer in his office. He keeps the key hidden in the study. I never thought to look. But now, Ben's eyes lit up with interest. That's our next move. Whatever's in that drawer could be the missing link. Sandy barked sharply, breaking the moment. My heart raced as Ben moved toward the window again. It's the same car, he muttered. We need to stay low profile. If Jack suspects anything, he might escalate. Lisa's voice was firm. Then we act now. Emily, we'll go to your house together, but you stay in the car with Sandy. Ben and I will handle the office. I looked at Sandy, her loyal eyes meeting mine. For the first time, a flicker of courage replaced my fear. Let's do it. The drive to my house felt like an eternity. The night air was still, yet my heart raced with every passing second. Lisa drove with laser focus, Ben in the passenger seat scanning the streets for anything unusual. I sat in the back with Sandy, her head resting on my lap as if sensing my unease. Remember, Ben said, turning to face me, you and Sandy stay in the car. If anything feels off, you call us immediately. I nodded, clutching my phone tightly. My house loomed in the distance, its windows dark except for the faint glow of a lamp in the living room. It was too quiet, and the silence made my skin crawl. Lisa parked a few houses down, cutting the engine. "We'll be quick," she whispered, grabbing a flashlight and slipping it into her jacket pocket. Ben opened the door, his movements deliberate and quiet. I watched them disappear into the shadows, my heart pounding like a drum. Sandy shifted beside me, her ears twitching. She let out a low, warning growl. "What is it, girl?" I murmured, stroking her fur to calm her. I peered into the darkness, scanning for movement. The car parked a few houses down still hadn't moved, but its presence gnawed at me. Minutes passed like hours. I couldn't take my eyes off the house, straining to catch a glimpse of Lisa or Ben. Then, a faint light flickered inside, the beam of their flashlight. My grip on Sandy tightened. Suddenly, a figure darted across the lawn. My stomach dropped. "Ben? Lisa?" I whispered to myself, panic setting in. But the figure didn't come from the house, it came from the street. It moved quickly, heading toward the side of the house. Sandy barked sharply, the sound piercing the still night. I fumbled with my phone, dialing Lisa's number. It rang twice before she answered in a hushed tone. "What's wrong?" "There's someone outside," I whispered. "They're heading toward the house." Lisa cursed under her breath. "Stay in the car. Lock the doors. We'll handle it." The line went dead, and I obeyed her instructions, locking the car doors and pulling Sandy close. She growled again, her hackles raised. My pulse thundered in my ears as I stared at the house, praying Lisa and Ben were safe. Moments later, I saw the front door creak open. Lisa and Ben emerged, their faces tense. Ben carried a folder under his arm. They made their way back to the car quickly, their movements sharp and purposeful. "Start the car," Ben ordered as soon as they slid inside. "We've got company." Lisa didn't hesitate, firing up the engine and pulling away from the curb. I glanced back, and sure enough, the parked car had its headlights on now, following us at a distance. "What did you find?" I asked, my voice shaking. Ben held up the folder. Bank records, fake IDs, and correspondence. Enough to prove Jack's been running this scam for years. But we've got bigger problems right now. Lisa glanced in the rearview mirror, her grip tightening on the wheel. "They're tailing us." "Lose them," Ben said. Lisa pressed the gas, weaving through side streets and alleys. The car behind us followed relentlessly, its headlights glaring like a predator's eyes. Sandy barked again, her tension matching mine. "Emily," Ben said, his tone urgent. "Stay down. If this is someone Jack sent, they won't hesitate to come after you." I ducked down in my seat, holding Sandy close. Lisa took a sharp turn, the tires screeching against the asphalt. The pursuing car struggled to keep up, its headlights bobbing as it veered around the corner. "Gotcha," Lisa muttered, cutting through an alley. She emerged onto a main road and took another turn, finally losing the tail. "Where do we go now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ben sighed, his eyes still scanning the road. "Somewhere safe. We need time to sort through these documents and get them to the authorities. This isn't over yet." "Emily." Sandy licked my hand, her steady presence grounding me. I nodded, my fear slowly giving way to determination. Jack might have orchestrated this nightmare, but I wasn't going to let him win. Not with Sandy, Lisa, and Ben by my side. Lisa pulled into an empty parking lot behind an old diner, cutting the engine and plunging the car into silence. Ben immediately began rifling through the folder he had taken from Jack's office. Sandy sat alert in the back seat, her watchful eyes scanning the darkness outside. "This," Ben said, holding up a sheet of paper, "is exactly what we needed." I leaned forward, peering at the document. It was a list of transactions linked to multiple accounts, each under a different alias. My heart sank as I recognized some of the amounts, sums that had been siphoned from our joint account over the past few months. "Look at this," Ben continued, pointing to a name at the top of the page. "He's been moving money into offshore accounts under the name J. Sutter. It's all here, dates, amounts, Even the routing numbers. Lisa whistled low. This is enough to sink him. It's more than that, Ben said grimly, flipping to another page. He's not just hiding money. These accounts are tied to other identities, fake identities. He's been laundering money and using unsuspecting people, like Emily, to fund his scams. I felt a lump rise in my throat. How could I have been so blind? I whispered, tears threatening to spill. Lisa placed a hand on my arm. Don't do that. This isn't your fault. Jack is a master manipulator. He's done this to others before you. Ben nodded. Rachel, and from what I can tell, at least 3 other women. Sandy let out a low growl, her gaze fixed on the parking lot entrance. We all turned, tension thick in the air. A car slowed as it passed the diner, its headlights sweeping over us before disappearing into the night. We can't stay here long, Lisa said, her voice tight. If Jack knows we've been in his office, he'll figure out where we are eventually. Ben looked up from the folder, his jaw set. We need to go to the authorities now. This is enough evidence to get them involved. Lisa hesitated. Do we have enough time to file a report before Jack catches on? He's not the type to sit back and wait. Ben glanced at me. Emily, do you still have any of his messages? Emails? Texts? Anything incriminating? I nodded, fumbling for my phone. He sent me controlling messages, things about checking my accounts, my whereabouts. Perfect, Ben said. We'll compile everything. Between this folder and your messages, we'll have a solid case. Lisa started the car again. All right, we head to the police station, but we need to stay alert. If that car we saw earlier was Jack, or someone working for him, they might try to intercept us. The drive was tense, every passing vehicle a potential threat. Sandy remained alert, her growls occasionally rumbling from the back seat. Finally, the glowing sign of the police station came into view, and relief washed over me. Inside, a detective named Martinez greeted us after hearing a brief explanation of the situation. His stern expression softened as he flipped through the folder. This is substantial, Martinez admitted. If what you're saying checks out, we're looking at a pattern of fraud, identity theft, and likely other charges. We'll need to act fast to prevent him from disappearing. Can you protect Emily? Lisa asked. Because once Jack knows she's involved the police, he's going to come after her. Martinez nodded. We can provide temporary protection and put surveillance on her residence. But we'll also need her cooperation to lure him out. Lure him out? I asked, my voice trembling. Yes, Martinez said firmly. Jack's already on edge. If we set a trap and he thinks he's in control, he's likely to slip up. But we need your help. Emily, are you willing to confront him one last time? My stomach churned at the thought, but I looked at Lisa, Ben, and Sandy. Their unwavering support bolstered me. I nodded, my voice steady. I'll do it. Martinez wasted no time. He spread out the documents and messages across his desk, his mind clearly working at full speed. We'll craft a scenario where Jack believes he has the upper hand. He began. We need him to incriminate himself, to confirm his fraudulent activities directly. Emily, this means you'll need to talk to him. The room fell silent. I felt Lisa's hand on my shoulder, grounding me, while Sandy pressed against my leg, her warm presence steadying my nerves. What do I need to do? I asked, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. Martinez leaned forward, his expression firm but compassionate. We'll wire you with a discreet microphone. When you meet Jack, steer the conversation toward his finances. Ask about the money transfers, the offshore accounts, anything that forces him to admit what he's done. What if he gets violent? Lisa cut in, her voice sharp. Emily can't be left defenseless. Martinez nodded. We'll have officers nearby, monitoring everything in real time. The moment we sense danger, we'll intervene. Ben stepped forward. We'll also need to control the setting, somewhere public but not crowded. Somewhere Jack feels comfortable enough to let his guard down. I thought for a moment. The coffee shop near his office. He always liked it there. It's familiar, but not too busy. Perfect. Martinez agreed. We'll set it up for tomorrow. Jack will likely be on edge after tonight. But if you act vulnerable, like you're unsure of yourself, he'll think he still has control. Lisa frowned. You're asking Emily to walk into the lion's den. Are you sure this is the best way? It's the only way, Ben said, his voice low. Jack doesn't leave loose ends. If we don't act now, he'll disappear, and Emily will always be looking over her shoulder. The weight of their words settled over me. I looked down at Sandy, her golden eyes meeting mine with quiet determination. If she could be fearless, so could I. I'll do it, I said finally. Let's make this happen. The next day, I sat in the coffee shop, my nerves frayed but my resolve unshaken. The microphone was hidden beneath the neckline of my blouse, its wire running discreetly to a small transmitter in my pocket. Across the street, Martinez and his team were stationed in an unmarked car, their radios crackling softly as they monitored the feed. Lisa sat a few tables away, pretending to be engrossed in a book, while Ben lingered near the entrance, his eyes scanning for any sign of trouble. Sandy wasn't allowed inside, but she was with one of the officers just outside the shop, ready to spring into action if needed. Jack arrived 10 minutes late, his expression a mix of frustration and smugness. He slid into the seat across from me, his movements calculated. Emily, he said smoothly, as if nothing had happened. I'm glad you agreed to meet. I forced a weak smile, playing the part of the shaken wife. Jack, we need to talk. About everything. His eyes narrowed, but he leaned back, feigning casualness. Everything? What's there to talk about? You overreacted at the wedding. Things got heated. Sure, but we can move past it. I don't think we can, I said, my voice trembling just enough to sound believable. You've been hiding things from me, Jack. The accounts. The money. What's going on? His jaw tightened. What are you talking about? I found the transfers. I pressed gently. The offshore accounts. The names? J. Sutter. Jack? Why would you do this to me? For a moment, his mask slipped, his eyes darkened, and his lips curled into a sneer. You've been snooping where you shouldn't. Emily, that's not very trusting of you. I trusted you with everything, I said, letting my anger slip through. And now I find out you've been lying to me? Stealing from me? Jack leaned forward, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. You don't understand, do you? Everything I've done to protect us, to make sure we have the life we deserve. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. Protect us? By stealing from me? By ruining other people's lives? You don't know what you're talking about, he hissed. And you're in over your head. I glanced toward the window, where Martinez's car was parked. My voice steadied as I delivered the final blow. It's over, Jack. I know everything, and so do they. Before he could react, 2 officers entered the coffee shop, their badges flashing as they approached. Jack Peterson, you're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and financial crimes, one of them announced. Jack's face twisted in rage as he stood, knocking over his chair. You set me up, he snarled at me. You'll regret this. But I didn't flinch. For the first time, I felt free. As they led Jack away in handcuffs, Lisa and Ben rushed to my side. Sandy, sensing the tension had passed, bounded in from outside, her tail wagging furiously. You did it, Lisa said, hugging me tightly. It's over. But as I looked at the officers loading Jack into the patrol car, I knew this was just the beginning. There would be trials, hearings, and countless questions. But with my friends and Sandy by my side, I was ready to face it all. The days following Jack's arrest felt surreal. The whirlwind of police interviews, meetings with lawyers, and media attention left little time to process what had happened. Detective Martinez had been right. Jack's crimes were far-reaching. As more evidence came to light, it became clear he had been running scams for years, leaving a trail of broken lives in his wake. Lisa, Ben, and Sandy became my unwavering support system. Lisa handled calls from curious friends and family, deflecting invasive questions with her signature sharp wit. Ben worked closely with the authorities, using his insider knowledge of Jack's operations to strengthen the case against him. And Sandy was my rock. Her quiet companionship a constant reminder that I wasn't alone. One evening, about a week after the arrest, I received a call from Rachel Bennett. Her voice was tentative but strong. "Emily, I just wanted to thank you," she said, "for standing up to him, for doing what I couldn't. You helped me more than you realize." I replied, "Your story gave me the courage to see the truth." We talked for hours, sharing our experiences and piecing together the puzzle of Jack's deceit. Rachel had been through hell emotionally, financially, and physically, but she was rebuilding her life, one step at a time. Her resilience inspired me, and we agreed to stay in touch. The trial began 3 months later. Jack's confident smirk had vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating demeanor. He pleaded not guilty, claiming he was a victim of false accusations. But the evidence was overwhelming. Martinez and his team had uncovered a network of offshore accounts, fake businesses, and manipulated documents, all tied directly to Jack. The courtroom was packed with reporters and spectators, their eyes fixed on the man who had conned so many. Rachel testified first, her voice steady as she recounted the emotional and financial abuse she endured. Her testimony was powerful, painting a damning portrait of Jack's manipulation and greed. When it was my turn, I felt a wave of nerves as I stepped onto the stand. I glanced at Lisa and Ben in the audience, their reassuring nods giving me the strength to continue. I spoke about the love I thought I had, the lies that unraveled it, and the moment I realized Jack had been using me all along. And when he realized I wasn't going to stay silent, I said, my voice steady. He tried to scare me into submission, but I refused to let him win. The prosecutor presented the bank records, emails, and recordings as evidence. Each document, each message, was a nail in Jack's proverbial coffin. The defense tried to paint me as vindictive, someone seeking revenge for a failed marriage. But the evidence was irrefutable. As the trial progressed, more women came forward. Their stories echoed Rachel's and mine. Tales of manipulation, stolen finances, and shattered trust. It became clear that Jack hadn't just been committing crimes. He'd been systematically destroying lives. When the verdict was finally read, guilty on all counts, a collective sigh of relief swept through the courtroom. Jack was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with additional financial restitution ordered to his victims. The weight I had been carrying for months lifted, replaced by a sense of closure. Life didn't return to normal overnight, but it did get better. Rachel and I co-founded a support group for women who had experienced financial and emotional abuse. We called it Reclaimed Voices. And it quickly grew into a network of survivors sharing their stories and helping one another heal. Lisa became one of our most passionate advocates, using her fierce loyalty and organizational skills to create workshops on financial literacy and self-empowerment. Ben, meanwhile, took on a consulting role with law enforcement, using his knowledge of fraud schemes to help prevent others from falling victim to people like Jack. As for me, I found a new purpose in telling my story. I spoke at conferences, schools, and community centers, sharing what I had learned about resilience and the importance of trusting your instincts. Sandy often joined me, her presence a reminder of the unconditional love and strength that got me through the darkest moments. 1 year after the trial, I stood at the podium at a Reclaimed Voices conference, looking out at an audience of survivors and supporters. My wedding dress, once a symbol of heartbreak, was displayed on stage, not as a reminder of pain, but as a testament to the strength it took to move forward. Sometimes, The worst days of our lives become the beginning of something greater, I said, my voice clear and steady. For me, it was the day I learned to stand up for myself, to take back my voice, and to trust the people, and the golden retriever, who reminded me that I was never truly alone. The audience erupted in applause, and I stepped down, Sandy trotting faithfully at my side. I smiled, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The storm Jack brought into my life had finally passed, and in its place was a future filled with hope, strength, and the unbreakable bond between a woman and her dog.